So a big issue was these CTE teachers are so knowledgeable in welding, cosmetology, biotechnology, but they're lacking the skills to take the textbook and teach that theory behind the hands-on piece.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months' worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. This week's episode is titled What Educators Should Know About Career Technical Education, and I'm talking today with Samantha Shane, a former English teacher who now specializes in CTE, or Career Technical Education. Samantha is celebrating the launch of her new book, which is dedicated to supporting secondary educators in the CTE classroom. If you're curious about the world of CTE, no matter what grade levels you support, this episode is super informative. Samantha shares really practical tips for teachers in all roles that you could really customize for different subject areas and grade levels, and offers some great insight into the future of CTE classrooms. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today about all things career technical education. But before we get into all that, can you share a little bit for listeners? What is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a longtime listener, actually. I started teaching and I found your podcast and your website, and I always was so obsessed with it. So this is like a moment for me.
So outside of you on.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So in education, I'm currently a career technical education teacher. I started my career as an English teacher before taking on the CTE role. So I teach students that want to pursue the field of education. And when I was in high school, I was actually a CTE student. So I actually teach the program that I went to. So it's a very full circle moment for me.
That's amazing. And I guess, that must bring such an amazing perspective to the work that you do. I'm sure some level of street cred to the students who you work with, who can see, or your journey and hear about it. And, today we're talking about your new book, the Secondary Educators CTE Toolkit. And for listeners who may not be as familiar, how do you define career and technical education, or that CTE acronym?
So really CTE has been transformed throughout the years, right? Many people think about vocational education and vocational schools being as schools for students that were misbehaving, or, they wanted them out of the public school systems. And CTE is really transformed into this amazing thing where it's not just auto, welding, cosmetology, but careers like business, computer science, biotechnology. But really, simply put, I think CTE is any elective class that students can explore a career pathway, and that is, designated for just exploring that, where they might be earning an industry recognized credential and really getting a
Uh-huh.
taste of what their future might look like.
Yeah. And, that's such an important point to make because for those of us who were in school a couple decades ago, right, as students, or who started teaching a couple decades ago as teachers, I guess I would fall into both of those categories. That term has evolved. The experience we may have had as students is different than what students are having today. And it's been interesting to hear more and more people, I know in my whole ed tech world, mention CTE conferences that they're going to, or educators they've connected with, or programs that are starting, in their home district or a district that they're working with. So what are some other, common misconceptions about what CTE looks like in today's classrooms?
Definitely. There's a lot because, some people think, like I said before, VOTEC is just bad for the bad students, or
Mhm.
on the opposite end, it's for the really smart students. But all of our students, regardless of their abilities, need CTE training.
Mm,
And giving them this in high school or even exploring it starting in middle school is really important. And it could really shape where students end up in life. Even if it's deciding, okay, like I tried business and I don't want to go into business. And so I'm not going to waste my time in college paying thousands of dollars every year. And then you change your major junior year.
right. Yeah, right. Just to get a taste of different careers. And, it's interesting you say that because I did my undergrad in elementary education kind of right away,
Mhm.
but I did take some business electives as a high school student. I went to a very big high school. There were lots of electives. And although I learned how to use Excel then, right, doing all sorts of graphing or equations, functions, my sister, she's in a full-time role where she's like in Excel all day, every day. I do the little things that I remember there, or now at least I know like it should be able to do this. And I have some context in the role I have now. So I think it's a great way to give a student a sense of, what is out there or what's, available. And so, as an author, what inspired you to write the Secondary Educators CTE Toolkit?
So, as an English teacher, I had this love of reading and writing. And as an English teacher at a CTE high school, had students in all different programs in my English class. And I was like, how can I make English more authentic for them, relate to their future careers? And so I was starting to use a lot of the instructional strategies that career tech teachers were using in their classrooms to, write business proposals instead of the 5-paragraph essay,
Yeah.
or, doing presentations on their future careers. So I started this like love of career technical education teaching. And then when I had the opportunity to jump into a CTE classroom, I fell in love with it even more. And then seeing this need for CTE training for teachers was really important to me. As a CTE teacher, I meet with a lot of different CTE teachers that come straight from industry.
Mhm.
So in 2021, about 40% of CTE teachers came straight from industry. So they're not getting the traditional training route of going to
Mhm.
college and student teaching. They're just coming straight from their industries and jumping into classrooms. And so a big issue was these CT teachers are so knowledgeable in welding, cosmetology,
Totally.
biotechnology, but they're lacking the skills to take the textbook and teach that theory behind the like hands-on piece. So my book aims to bridge that gap and really help CTE teachers learn the lingo of education and then learn those instructional strategies that work in any classroom that are not just English, math, or science, but any CTE classroom.
And I would imagine too, just, in my conversations with educators who may have gone through in non-traditional certification pathway,
Mhm.
right? They have the context or their expertise from their previous career they're bringing into classrooms. They have the drive and the motivation. They want to be there, right? They made this big switch. They're super motivated, but it's really challenging if you don't have a sense of what kids need in a classroom environment in K-12, right, or in secondary, right? It's
Right.
very different than even an on-the-job training that person might have facilitated. So I love that idea of setting them up for success because it really is a special educator population, right? A special group of people who are coming to this work often, right, without the same sort of training and experience for working with students. So, the book emphasizes creating rigorous, meaningful, comprehensive programs. What does that look like in practice?
So that's a great question because, like I was saying earlier, like bridging the gap between instructional strategies of like the textbook and then
Mhm.
going to work on a car, right? The students need to have all that background information. So, a rigorous, meaningful, comprehensive program is this authentic learning idea in our classroom. So, giving students choice, giving them the flexibility to take a risk and,
Mhm.
fail even and then learn from their mistakes and then apply it to a project. So, in a lot of the shops, we call them, they get to, put together a shower if they're in plumbing and then see if it works,
Yeah.
right? And they're learning all like the, science behind it, the different materials, the tools that they need. Or in my program, they're designing lesson plans and then they're going to actually teach them to real students and then reflecting on that process.
So I just love the authenticity that's there.
Mhm.
So, when you're talking to someone who maybe is designing, right, one of these activities, whether it's, building out a shower, like you mentioned, or creating lesson plans and then bringing them to a group of students in the district or wherever it might be, right? What strategies do you recommend for making CTE instruction really relevant and engaging for students?
Yeah, I think all teachers need to focus on first building a culture of learning and community in their classrooms. So, in order for students to take risks and fail and work with one another, they need to get students being okay with that and being
Mhm.
okay with each other. So, designing activities that may not seem always, related to the content,
Yeah.
like, I call them community builders, so they can one of the ones that my students love are soup salad sandwich, and I show a picture of, a food item, and then they have to categorize it as soup, salad, or sandwich, and then they discuss why. And it's just a silly little 10-minute activity that students get to do together and get some talking and building these relationships so that they can make relevant and engaging contributions later on. So it might seem like a lot of like, okay, like they're in high school, we're not going to play these silly games, but they are so important to creating that community. And then to make it more relevant and engaging, students may be learning about a specific, topic. I'll say standards in my program, and we talk about learning standards, the importance of them. Not all my students want to teach elementary school, so it's giving them the choice to then explore the standards in eighth grade English or
Mhm.
high school social studies and designing a lesson plan around that.
I love that combination of really collaborative activities where
Mhm.
students have to talk to someone else because it's pretty likely that even if they have a job that 80% of the time is like heads down, they're working on their own, there's still that 20% of the time they're going to have to talk to someone, right? Or do something as a team or ask for feedback, respond to feedback, right? So just building that muscle, but then also that student choice piece, right? Like what standards do you want to look at? Or, what is it that, resonates the most with, your interest where you want to head? But I would imagine for some of your students, they're probably surprising themselves, right? With what they like that they didn't think they would like or what they don't like and they just assumed would be like their thing. Have you seen some of those surprising moments?
Oh, definitely. My students will come in here freshman year and they're like, I definitely want to be an elementary school teacher, or I definitely want to be an occupational therapist. And through bringing in guest speakers and work based learning opportunities, they're like, oh, wait, never mind.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
actually want something else. Or I'll bring in a guest speaker that they've never heard of, like a child life specialist. And they're like, wait, like, this is
Mhm.
really cool. I definitely want to explore this career more.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I did, as I mentioned, I did my undergrad in elementary ed. And I always thought, I wanted to be with the littles. I'm sure that would have been a lot of fun too, right? But my student teaching experiences in upper elementary school were really positive, were surprising. I ended up going on to teach fifth grade for about 7 years, right? So, that was surprising to me in the moment. And I also was in a program where they put us in classrooms first semester, freshman
Mhm.
year. And I saw a lot of people say, this is not for me, right? Like, and they needed that, right? They needed to be, and sure, you could say, maybe that was like a semester like wasted. Well, no, I think it was like 3.5 years saved probably.
Right.
Yeah, right? Because, they didn't get to their student teaching practicum 3 years in and then realize this wasn't for them. So I love that opportunity for kids to really get a feel for what something might be related to their expectations and what it might not be at all. Right? It's
Right.
not look like Instagram or like whatever they're thinking. So as you're, working out, what is the best practice in a CTE classroom, how can traditional classroom teachers, who are teaching, a variety of subjects maybe, or just within one discipline or one department, how can they collaborate with CTE educators to help kids connect learning to possible future opportunities?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways that this could be done. When I was an English teacher, I was always so jealous of my CTE counterparts because, I'm teaching Frankenstein and they're like, the kids are coming in saying, I'm growing algae or I'm going to go present this at a statewide conference. And I was like, I want them to be just as excited about English as they
Yeah.
are their CTE programs. So I would say I would then think of, okay, like I'm reading Frankenstein. What CTE programs can connect to this book right now and make it relevant and engaging? So just thinking of unique interdisciplinary connections to expose students to different careers. So with Frankenstein, for example, we then looked at biotechnology and we looked at
Mhm.
bioethics, and then students researched current bioethics issues, and our biotech students would teach my English students about bioethics, and then we were coming up with debates and doing research papers. And so that was like an unlikely connection, but
Yeah.
it was so relevant and meaningful to Frankenstein.
Right. And might not think it makes sense right at first, but then I'm sure as the kids dive right in, they're like, oh, like, this is not what Mary Shelley was thinking, probably, right?
Right.
But, now that I'm deep into this text, right, I have a different appreciation for what I'm reading. And I also see like how this is connected to what my life might be like, in 5 years from now.
Totally. And then I think the other way that traditional classroom teachers can collaborate with CTE educators is just exposing different career opportunities in their program. So if you're a math teacher, talk to the different programs about how they use math and CTE and collaborate
Mhm.
that way. Or expose them to the different careers that are math related to electrical or welding
Yeah.
or all the different academies and careers out there. And then lastly, I would say, focusing on resumes, the critical thinking, the interview skills that students need to
Oh,
use, that can be used in any classroom. And then collaborating with the CTE teachers to either do a panel interview, right? What does that look like on the job in their classrooms?
yeah. No, I love just those, especially those opportunities for speaking and listening should be, an opportunity for someone to reflect on like, okay, what are we doing over this next month? Where can I pop in some of these pieces? So, what's, as an author of a book and pulling together lots of resources for readers, what do you hope they'll take away from your new book?
So I really hope that readers take away that this is very easy to implement. When I go to professional learning, I love when I can take something and use it in my classroom tomorrow. So that's really what I tried to focus on in the book, is giving strategies that teachers do not need to really think a lot about or plan a lot because
Mhm.
they're more likely to implement it. So I really hope that readers can take away these strategies and then start implementing them in their classroom. And then I also hope that they just, really think, oh, I could do this. I don't need to be like an academy or shop teacher to do these career technical things, right? I can do this in my English class or my science class and really make learning relevant and meaningful for all students.
I love that. So, for someone listening who wants to just take one small step, maybe even this week or this month as they're listening to the episode, right? What's one thing they could do to make their instruction a bit more career connected?
I would say put the onus on the students. So have them research different careers that they might be interested in that's connected to whatever subject you're teaching, and design a small project or one day activity around that. Have some parameters like, what's the career, what's the connection to our subject, what do they do? And that's just one small step, and that has the students engaging in research skills, critical thinking,
Mhm.
and really thinking about their futures.
I love that. Again, just super doable for someone who sees the importance, understands, right, the why, right, that you're talking about today and that your book covers and wants to make it happen, in their classroom. So where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work and your new book?
So you can connect with me on X at Shane Learning is my X handle. And then I do have a website that will be linked and you can find me there. I'm really excited. My book will be available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Wonderful. And we'll link out to everything so everyone can go and find and jump into these great resources. So thank you so much for sharing with listeners lots of actionable info for them today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was such a fun conversation. Let's finish up today by making this EdTech easy with a few key points from the episode. CTE has evolved into broad career pathway exploration for all students. Many CTE teachers come from industry and need support with instructional strategies. Rigorous CTE programs blend theory, hands-on practice, and authentic learning. Interdisciplinary connections strengthen traditional subjects and expand career awareness. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode, including all of the ways to connect with Samantha Shane and her new book, by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months' worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.